Hey, all you crazy sci-fi fans. Time for your daily dose of insanity. Over here at the Sci-Fi Shenanigans podcast with your hosts, J.R. Handley and me, Chris Winder. Just two nerdy veterans geeking out over our science fiction passions. A place where the sky's the limit, space is the place, and nerds run the world. Without further ado.
All right, and welcome to the Sci-Fi Shenanigans podcast. Today we have as our special guest author Terry Mixon. He's an Army veteran, former NASA employee, a cat whisperer, and a teller of tall tales, who's published in small press anthologies with Chris Kennedy Publishing and written and publishes his own books independently. And finally, he's a murderer. Yes, that's right. He's killed me in at least one scene. Take that.
There's no body. There's no proof.
Take that, Joe Buckley. Of course, he's referencing that I asked for it to be as bloody and gruesome as possible, so he made it as bloodless as possible.
Not a single drop of blood, not a single molecule of his body left intact. Plasma is a wonderful thing to murder someone with.
And when the FBI is listening, because we all know they are listening to you, Terry.
It's the NSA that's listening. Get it right, buddy.
He had to say that right as I start to take a drink of my coffee. Oh, who needs a monitor anyway? Coffee spewed everywhere. All right. So the other thing we do when we introduce a guest is we like to tell if we know them personally or we've met them professionally, how we met them. So I know that when I first found Terry, it was through the Dead Robot Society fan page because I was first starting writing. So I started listening to Write Early, as you do, podcasts, and I found the Dead Robot Society. And when I first started looking for them, apparently there is a defunct toy company that was the Dead Robots Society, and they made like little miniature robots, hence the name. So I thought I was confused, and then I ended up finding them on Facebook, and I heard him talking about his books, and I said, that was interesting. So I started reading them. He's been super friendly since I met him, shy of killing me a few times. Okay, who am I kidding? I'm lying. He's a jerk, and I'm a masochist.
That totally works. And by the way, that's a lovely fantasy that you just spun out, but we all know that we met at a strip club.
Shh, my wife might listen.
I can always edit that part out.
So he's extremely helpful, him and his podcast, his co-host, Paulie Cooley, and the Dead Robot Society fan page. They're very helpful if you're a new author looking to do authorly things. So check them out. We'll put the notes in the show note. And he's also been interviewed by our sponsor, the Keystroke Medium. So he had a live episode there where he pretended like he was intelligent.
It sometimes works.
So that's how I met him. And, I've always liked to see an Army boy make big.
That happens occasionally too. What can I say?
So what about you, Chris? When do you remember when you first met the man, the myth, the legend?
Oh, it wasn't actually that long ago.
Wait a minute. I thought we were talking about me. What's this legend business?
Well, I mean, since you're as old as Father Time, I just thought, I was trying to respect my elders.
Get off my lawn!
It's the beard.
It's the beard. I'm just jealous. I'm not going to lie. I tried to grow a beard once, and I look like the Unabomber.
Well, yeah, there's that. So I first met Terry when I tried a whole bunch of different things in my life. I'd owned several businesses, and I always went back to something creative. So I decided to give writing a chance. And I think I started out like a whole bunch of other people did by buying books on writing, how-tos, kind of for dummy books. And that wasn't really working for me. So I started looking around and I looked up best podcasts for writers. That's what I Googled. And the Dead Robot Society came up, and I knew I'd found my people. So I'd never listened to a podcast ever in my life before that. So that was my first one. I started downloading the episodes, and I'm one of those masochists who started with episode 1 until I finally caught up.
You poor bastard.
And it took about a month of binging to get completely caught up. And even then, even when I was completely caught up, I still hadn't gone to their Facebook page. But once I finally did, and I saw Terry there, and I saw the post, and I associated that with the person and the soft, sultry voice. And After that,
it's a trick. Trick.
After that, I just started bugging him just a little bit. I wasn't sure I was allowed to. I was too new to bug him, but he was friendly. So after that, I just kept bugging him and Facebook stalking him and doing the normal things.
Yes, you
things
did.
One does.
So I haven't actually gone all the way back to one. I started listening in August 2015, and I think I went back to the beginning of 2015, but I mean, they've been on for what, 10 years now?
Yeah. We had our 10-year anniversary late last year sometime.
So I have not listened to 10 years worth of podcasts. I started in 2015. I started with the January 1st.
We've gotten much better since then.
And I've heard your opinion evolve on issues as you went, professionally speaking.
It's totally true. If you're not open-minded to where you reassess the things that you think are true, then you're not going to grow in whatever you're doing. You've got to be willing to accept that circumstances change or that you were wrong. So I hope that never changes.
I would admit I was wrong if I ever was, people. I just want you to know that's how humble I am. I'm willing to admit that I was wrong if I ever am.
Hasn't happened yet, but it could, right?
It could happen.
Well, you're married, so your wife will be there to tell you when you're wrong.
But we didn't come here to talk about writing books. We came to interview Terry today about his books. So let's transition there. There are plenty of how-to writing podcasts, including one Terry co-hosts. But there aren't as many about, let's just talk only nerding out on sci-fi books.
So, Terry, we ask all the authors this question. What do you personally love about science fiction as the genre?
I like the adventure because it's not stuff that's normally set here on Earth in the modern day, which I read things like that too. But with science fiction, I can go into space. I can meet alien people. I can put science that doesn't exist today out on the page. I can explore the ramifications of social change when it appeals to me, and all those things that I can just expand upon reality and experiment, see what happens.
I hear a lot of authors saying that, where especially with these social commentary, that if you kind of make it third person, kind of a distant third person, by making it happen on another world to people that don't technically speak our language, although it's written in English, then it makes it more palatable for people. Have you noticed that, like with Star Trek and some of your own writing?
Yeah, I don't actually set out to do much social commentary. It just happens.
Okay.
Fair enough. So, what's your first memory of watching or reading or playing games in the science fiction genre?
Space 1999. Watching it on television after school. That's what I remember.
I don't think I've ever seen that.
Me neither.
Was that before
Martin
my time?
Landau. That was way before your time.
And I think
the graphics were cheesy, the storylines were cheesy, and I still have all 8 seasons. I think it's 8 seasons on DVD sitting downstairs.
That's great.
Because I just loved the heck out of it.
Okay. I'll have to check that out. Does it hold up, do you think?
No, not even close. I heard that they were going to redo it and make a new one called Space 2099 and have that come out. So you may get to see a reboot of that, because everything is being rebooted these days.
Because Hollywood is out of ideas. Uh-huh. They just need to call us.
Things like Battlestar Galactica, the original series. Star Trek, I watched the reruns of that. I was a little old to catch it when it first came out, or a little young, but I caught it as it was coming out afterwards. So those kind of things are what I grew up on, and they heavily influenced me. And of course, reading wise, I was, a student. I was a little kid. I was broke. I'd stop by a used bookstore and pick up whatever was there that looked interesting for 10, 15, 20 cents, whatever it was, because it wasn't much back then. And I got to read all kinds of things like E. Doc Smith stuff from the 30s and 40s. So I grew up on a lot of old fiction. And I think that heavily influences what I write today.
Okay. He's not saying he's old, people. But
I'm over 50, so yeah, I'm pretty old.
I I was going to say Shakespeare signed his yearbook, but, he jumped in to say how old he was, too. So killed my joke. Ooh.
Awkward.
Well, he did that voice a little too well, Terry. All right. So how did that love of reading and watching science fiction transition into writing your own books?
It's hard to say. I was a role player for decades. I started when I was in the Army, started before I was in the Army. And that got me into the creative mindset for a long time. But I didn't write. I was just a reader until, less than 10 years ago. And one of my friends sent me a manuscript saying, I'm writing this book. Check it out. And I read it and I was like, shit, I could write too.
Mm-hmm.
And so I started picking up books and looking at things. I did like you did. I collected an intense library of how-to books, but I didn't actually write.
Right.
And it was a crutch. It was a way for me to procrastinate. And I eventually realized that and just started writing.
Now, what was your role-playing drug of choice?
Oh, good Lord. Everything. D&D, Traveler, various spy games, Star Trek, the role-playing game. We were all over the map.
Nice.
Gamma World, goodness only knows. Champions, everything.
Yeah, that's way too many to throw in the show notes. So we'll just put role-playing game.
I should have listed out about a dozen more just to make your life hell.
Love it.
So Traveler seems to be a popular one. I know when we interviewed Tim Taylor, that was one of his he mentioned as well.
See, Traveler, that's a fun one there because you've got various lifestyle levels of it because I had there's the classic Traveler that came out way back when. Then they tried to change it up. They rebooted it. Then there's the GURPS version. There's all kinds of stuff. Traveler's been a very popular science fiction universe to go ahead and role play in.
Now, I've had a theory with role playing is that the best writers were always the dungeon masters, but so far that theory has been completely squashed. How often were you the dungeon master?
Very often.
Okay. See, I was always.
Maybe I'm the exception that proves the rule.
Yeah, well, so far it's 2-1, but we'll see how it plays out because I think my theory is still pretty sound.
I think I'm going to have to disagree with you because I think that what gets people into being writers isn't setting up the world. It's taking a character that's a piece of paper and manifesting that personality and expressing that personality through role-playing it, growing it in your mind, because stories are about characters and situations. And so if you really dig down to it, it's going to be the playing part that I think is important.
Oh, okay. I think you're right. I think I stand corrected. Wow, first time I've ever been wrong. Is this how you feel all the time, GR?
Mark that down. This is February 3rd, 2018.
Wow. Ouch. Did you eat like extra crowns this morning?
Yeah, I did. I made it all very salty.
So when you were playing the role-playing game, was it just the dice and some pen and paper, or was it were you doing like the table miniatures?
No, we never did the miniatures. It was all just the dice and the papers and people pantomiming. A lot of pantomiming was going on.
Now, when you were doing it, was it as socially acceptable as it is now, or was it something you had to like skulk into the closet somewhere?
No, we went to the activity center on the base and played right there in the rooms. We didn't care.
Okay, fair enough.
Yep, when I was a kid, we might as well have been mixing drugs. We had to keep that secret.
Well, that's because I remember when it was in the 80s, the scare was D&D was going to lead to devil worship.
Children were sacrificed.
Right.
Apparently not me, because I made it. I survived the great apocalypse of the D&D wars.
Yes, but did you? Did you really?
I don't know. I could be in a coma, and this could all be an elaborate dream.
I think that you've got something going on in your basement. I don't think you really survived the way you think you did.
All right. So,
all right, Terry. So I'm wondering, was it the role playing? Was it Legos, a book, a movie? What was it that you think hooked you into sci-fi?
It has to be books because I grew up very isolated from a lot of other kids because my parents lived 20 miles outside of a small town, 2 miles down a dirt road where I had to come up with my own amusement. And it ended up being books because television in those days was 3 channels and the reception wasn't that great.
Right. And you had to have the rabbit ears with the foil on it.
Yep. And if you wanted to change the channels, you had to use the pliers to turn the knob.
Because the knob broke off, huh?
Exactly so.
That's when you had remotes. You called them kids. Go change the channel.
I remember. Here we go. Let's go back to the Wayback Machine. I remember when my parents upgraded from a black and white television to color.
Wow.
Did it blow your mind?
Yeah, pretty much.
I don't remember ever not having color.
You young man.
Although,
of course, I tortured my my oldest stepdaughter when we were growing up. I told her that she was watching a black and white movie, and I said, "Yeah, that was filmed as was. Color didn't exist until about 40 years ago." And she's staring at me like, "What?"
Right.
Gullible.
Wow. Although I do remember a couple years ago, I was working at a coffee shop and I went, one of the employees was a fan of some movie. I don't even remember what it was. And so I went to Blockbuster. That's how long ago it was because Blockbuster was still open. And I went to the teller and I was like, do you have this movie? Oh, we don't have it in CD. Well, do you have it in VHS? What's that? A tape. Oh, you mean music? No, like a VHS, a movie tape. She had no clue that movies once came in those little square boxes, rectangle boxes.
How times change.
I still remember the please be kind and rewind mantra when you were checking out your movies.
I still remember we had our own separate rewinder so we wouldn't wear out the VCR.
Yes.
There you go.
Or you would get the movies if you paused it a lot in the same space where you'd see the little lines across it when you watched it.
Yeah.
And let's not even start with the whole VHS Betamax wars.
I remember it, but I wasn't techie enough to know what the heck they were talking about.
Yeah,
I remember having to think about which one I wanted to buy when I bought my first one. I was like, "Gosh, should I get the Betamax because it's high tech?" Okay.
And then, of course, when they switched to CD, and all of your movie collection suddenly was useless.
Speak for yourself, buddy. I still got a VHS on my shelf.
Ours finally died, and we haven't been able to find a replacement. So we had most of those movies on CD at that point. So, all right. So, Chris and I, obviously, we're both fans of yours. That's partly how we met. So if people think we're nuts and this is all insanity, it's your fault, Terry. I just want you to know that.
I accept complete responsibility for this.
And you've written a lot of these series. So you've written the Empire of Bones series, the Vigilante, the Humanity Unlimited, the Scorched Earth saga. You've written in 3 Four Horsemen Universe anthologies, the Expanded Universe 3 anthology, and you're writing your current Jelly Gator NATO movie flip script, for...
That's the secret project. We don't talk about that.
I thought you announced that already, that you're writing the script for Sci-Fi Channel.
I really should because anybody can, really.
Anybody can. That
I can see it. It'll be huge.
That ought to be an interesting movie. I didn't say good. I said interesting.
Well, that'll be right up there with the epic sci-fi FY versus sci-fi FI debates I've seen on Twitter. Like, really? Do we really need to go there? But apparently we did.
We can't talk until you watch all of the Sharknado movies. We're not going to be talking about that.
There's only, 3 of them?
Oh, no, there's 5.
Oh, my gosh.
5 Sharknado movies. My wife actually watched all of them, and I'm standing there shaking my head going, I just don't get it. But then again, there's no accounting for taste. She also looks at the Finding Bigfoot TV series, the Ghost Hunters, so yeah. By the way, the Ghost Hunters are way more mainstream than the Finding Bigfoot people. I just got to say that.
So the Bigfoot just doesn't want to be found, and it's okay because he doesn't believe in you either.
This is a good thing.
So my mind is blown that they have that many Sharknadoes. Like the first one was ridiculous enough. But
they got more ridiculous as they went along. I only saw bits and pieces of it, but they went out of their way to just be as crazy as they could. So yeah, it's all that and more. So yeah, I could totally write that.
So what substances do you suspect that they were injecting?
Everything under the sun. There has to be some LSD involved. They were smoking pot. I have no idea what all they were taking, but it was very psychedelic.
Okay, I still think this is a trick. I still don't think there's actually a Sharknado movie, even though I've seen the posters and everything. I'm just afraid I'm going to go into a store and ask, hey, where's the Sharknado movie? And it's going to be like, well, in the Marines we did this, probably in the Army, a little bit of hazing. Have you ever been sent to supply for a BA 1100 November?
No.
No, I haven't, but I've sent somebody to supply. I've sent somebody to go ahead and get an ASH receiver for a helicopter, an ashtray.
I feel it's just going to be like that, and everyone's going to laugh, and because there's no such movie.
It's on
Y'all
Netflix,
are trying
buddy.
to trick me.
Okay.
I'm afraid I'm going to look it up on Netflix, and one of those troll faces is going to appear. The troll song.
Yep. Go ahead and put that right next to the skid tube lube and the rest of that stuff.
So
and the board stretcher when you cut a board too short.
So I'm a son of a sailor, so I actually had heard a lot of the stories like the prop wash and all this stuff. So when they tried those in the Army, I didn't fall for any of them. So
we actually had somebody take a grease gun and fill up one of the skid tubes. We had to take it. Here's where it comes back to haunt you. We had to take it off and clean it out.
Well, that's great.
Civilians have these kinds of things too, because I saw somebody selling bottled air. Like, oh, I'm selling you bottled mountain air. Like somebody literally that lives in the mountains just takes a jar, closes the lid, and says it's air. Like, I'm selling you clean mountain air. Really?
I've seen people selling dehydrated water.
I saw a thing for diet water too, so it takes all kinds. But so all of your books, keeping us on track, because otherwise this will be a 5-hour show and your wife will be mad at us because we took your whole day away from you. All of the series sound fascinating, but the one series that we've both read to completion to current was the Empire of Bones series. So that's what we kind of wanted to talk to you about today.
Sure.
It was the first series that both Chris and I read, and so when we started finding the e-book universe, it was one of the first ones. So where did you get the premise initially for this universe?
Honestly, all I had in mind when I started writing this was the character of Princess Kelsey and the idea of what would happen to her to change her. And I started writing to try to figure out how that happened. I had no idea precisely how it would have happened.
So I think I've told you this, but I've listened to the audiobooks at Veronica, and do you know how to pronounce her last name correctly?
Jaguar.
Okay, I was never sure, and I didn't want to get it wrong. But so she narrates the audiobooks, and I listen to them too because they're really good. If you haven't listened, you should go check them out. I think he sponsored one of our recent episodes. But the Princess Kelsey scene was one of them was coming on, and my son wanted to know why she didn't have pink armor because she was a princess.
She totally needs pink armor.
She does. So just thought I'd throw that out there. I thought that was hilarious. And he's very literal. So, she's a princess. Of course she needs pink.
Her helmet's got to have a bow on it too.
Absolutely. You should make this happen. And then, of course, she would rip the head off of anyone who gave it to her. That would be a funny scene.
I could see her stomping her foot in outrage.
So, anyway.
So one of the things I like about this series is that between book 1 and 2, book 2 and 3 and on, I can never predict where it's going to go.
Me either.
How do you make that transition from book 1 to 2 and from book 2 to 3? Does it involve psychedelics, a Ouija board, overindulging in pie?
No, basically when I come back to write the next book, I sit down and I say, okay, we left up with things going here. What's the natural outgrowth of that book? What would really happen if this was a real circumstance? Don't ignore any elephants in the room. Deal with them. Deal with the circumstances as they are and start writing from there to go forward.
Because you're a discovery writer, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Can you explain to our readers what that, or listeners, what that means?
Sure. It means that I don't outline. I don't really know what's going to happen. I might have a character or a scene, or perhaps I think I know where the book might end when I start writing. And if I think I know where the book's going to end, I am invariably wrong. It never goes the way that I think that it does. Basically, I'm a stream of consciousness writer. As things are happening in my mind, I'm writing those scenes, one scene after another. I will probably know what's coming in the next scene, maybe the scene after that. Beyond that, it's a big guessing game because it's all what seems to be logical flowing from that.
Okay. That must make it a little bit difficult.
Oh, no. That makes it fun. I get the same thing out of writing these stories as I do reading these stories because I'm getting to tell the story that I want to tell, and I'm being as surprised as much as everybody else as things are going along.
Okay. Now, is the omnibus that you have for the first 3, is that available in ebook as well?
It is.
Okay. I looked for it quickly and I couldn't find it, so I was going to put it in the show notes. But if you read the omnibus, instead of just buying book 1, 2, and 3, unless you've got, is that in KU as well, the omnibus?
It is.
So if you read the omnibus, that's the story where I get vaporized bloodlessly.
Yeah. A warning there, that short story that you get vaporized is actually set after book 4 because that's where it fell in there. So if you read books 1, 2, and 3, that short story may have a few spoilers if you don't read book 4 first.
Okay. But yeah, that's just, I figured I'd point out where they could find that short story. Next time he's going to...
You got what's coming to you, buddy.
Next time he's going to do it right, and he's going to kill me bloodily, horribly wrong. I want mangled corpses. I want all of it.
I promised you for the second one that there would be a river of blood, and I am a man of my word.
I mean, at this point, you've got to be able to top Chris Kennedy. If you haven't read any of the Four Horsemen universe, you should check it out. But in that one of those, he killed me, and I wrote him and I said, "That's it. You could do better. Come on." I wasn't impressed, and so he said, "What would you have in mind?" So I told Chris Kennedy that I wanted to get blown up in a brothel or something equally outrageous. So he dropped a space toilet on my head in a brothel. So I was just minding my own business, and falling from the sky is this giant space toilet, which splat. So if I ever cosplay myself, I can do it with a toilet. What the toilet seat is around the neck.
Ah, perfect.
And that's a heck of a segue, but we're going to have to pause for a word from our sponsors.
Sent on a mission critical to the survival of the New Terran Empire, Jared Mertz must travel deep into the AI-dominated Rebel Empire on an operation of deception. Only, there are games afoot that no one could foresee, and players at the table that no one could expect. The stakes couldn't be higher. When unexpected enemies deal themselves in, Jared must bet everything on a single hand. Bluffing might get him killed, but folding isn't an option. If you love military science fiction and grand adventure on a galaxy-spinning scale, grab The Terra Gambit and the rest of the Empire of Bones saga on Amazon today.
All right, Terry, so you've got so many books in this series. Do you see an end to this, or are you just going to keep going until you eventually get bored of it?
I doubt very seriously that I'm going to get bored of it because the scope of the story continues to expand. I've got literally 4 or 5 pages full of potential plot hooks that I've dropped that I have not actually done anything with, that I could write a story about, that I could do something within a story about. And it doesn't ever get smaller. It just keeps getting bigger. There are angles to this that I want to explore going forward that one human being just cannot do.
So this could end up being like Hardy Boys, where you have a couple hundred books, hopefully.
I would certainly hope so, but 100 books, that's a pretty big goal. I'm just going to keep writing until, well, I see vaguely where I think this series might end, but I see beyond that too, because I see other things that will then step up to be a big problem for the characters at that point. So
one of the things that I mentioned, that I said he was in the Expanded Universe anthology, his story there, I'm pretty sure that was the one that was set before the Empire of Bones universe, correct? So it was in that universe, but it was before.
Yep.
That was the So he has a character that he has mentioned when they show the original Terran Empire, which is the premise. So it's book 1. There's no spoilers there. Was that the Terran Empire falls, and from the ashes the Phoenix rises. And so one of the characters, which gets like a 3-second cameo in the audio section, it's that short, but they just to sort of harken back to what was before, gets her own short story. And so are you planning on doing anything with that character and writing the fall?
I intend to write another series called Imperial Marines that's going to deal with exactly those sorts of things, at least at the end of that series. It's going to deal with the buildup towards the fall.
Okay. So when do you see that coming down the pike?
I keep meaning to write the first book of it, but circumstances keep pushing it back. So I'm going to write the first book for that this year sometime.
Awesome.
Okay.
I'm looking forward to that.
So as long as Glenn Stewart leaves you alone long enough to write.
Well, I wouldn't say that that's going to happen, because I have a contract in my inbox that when my wife's computer gets set back up, I need to sign for the next 3 books. He's already going to have
outstanding.
Started that up. So I've got the contract. I just have to sign it and send it back.
Congratulations.
So how do you keep track of all those various series as you're jumping back and forth? So
Poorly.
Okay. Well, I was hoping for some nuggets of wisdom, but apparently it's whatever Terry's doing, don't do it. Except for his books sell really, really well, so maybe you should. I don't know.
Keeping track of it, it's one of the ways that I keep track of it is I try to keep a story Bible. That doesn't always work out as well as I would hope, especially when you start late and you don't have it done and you're 7 books in. Yeah, that's a problem.
I can see that.
Mainly it's just re-immersing yourself back into the characters and taking a look back at the last book and saying, okay, where were they and what were they doing? And then say, okay, scene 1. Here's how we start up the new thing after dealing with all the rest, and then just start writing from there. And the characters reassert themselves. They really do. You know who you're writing.
Right.
So do you have any plans to expand the universe like some of the others are doing with other authors writing in your playground or anthologies?
Well, I'm stalking people like Chris Kennedy and Michael Cooper who do that in their own universes. And I think I'm going to have Chris Kennedy come on to the Dead Robot Society sometime in the next couple of months and talk about what he's doing, because I'd really like to do that, because that looks like that would be a lot of fun.
Yeah, sure could.
Yeah. Now, there's 2 models for that. Would be one that you sort of oversee, so they stay in the canon, but they write it, their name's on it, and it's your universe. The other is that you co-write it with them. So which model, that's sort of what Michael Anderle does with his Cathurian Gambit universe. Which one do you like better as far as your own preferences?
I'm not a micromanager by default, but whatever is writing, I'd have to approve the major points because I want it to stay inside the story canon of ideas, because what happens in one series could impact another series. If they introduce a technology, I need to be on board with that technology so that it can be used. Or I can say, that ain't possible, bud.
Sure.
So what are your feelings on antimatter?
Well, I personally am in favor of antimatter.
That was I was an inside baseball joke. Basically, when he wrote when Terry wrote for the Four Horsemen anthologies, that was one of the things is they don't have antimatter in their universe. So he kept a long running banter on Facebook, convincing one of the creators of the universe, Mark Wandry, that his stories had antimatter in them. And then, of course, Mark being Mark would flip out. It was hilarious.
It was awesome.
What a troll.
and then I actually wrote the story with antimatter in it.
That's right, you did. I'd forgotten that. I've read the story too. But yeah, I just thought that was hilarious that you kept him going for so long before he realized it was a joke.
The reason that I could keep him going is because when they sent out the initial story Bible of this, it had a list of forbidden topics. And antimatter was not listed as a forbidden topic.
It is now.
No, it's canon now. That story that I wrote is canon. They may not let anybody else ever write about it again, but it exists.
So the story Bible they gave, I have to say that was pretty epic. Chris and I both wrote in the second anthology, so we've seen the story Bible, and it was pretty comprehensive of stuff. Is that something you imagine putting together for your universe when you eventually open it up, if you decide to go there?
I would have to do something very much like that to give an overview. But one of the problems, the story Bible was great, but it just I'd need to talk with whoever's going to be doing the writing and try to help them figure out where they're going to write their story to fit it in. Because when I started writing this, I was like, I don't really know anything about this universe. I read the books. I'm like, what should I write about? I felt a little lost about where to start. Having a starting page might be helpful.
Okay.
A starting point, maybe.
Well, the thing you've done that was different from theirs is you've entered the possibility that alternative realities existed. So they could still tell the mirror image universe stories and not trample on anything you've done, and still use some of your characters.
They could.
I think that could be interesting.
They could. You want me to spoil him? You want me to spoil
Princess Kelsey?
Right now?
Do it.
I use those things in the book that I'm just wrapping up.
Awesome. Well, then why don't I have it yet? Why can't I buy it? Take my money already.
I have to finish reading the last 5 chapters to make sure that they're good and get it off to the beta readers. I hope to get that done Sunday. So I'm looking at mid-February as the release date.
Wow, that's not too far away.
No.
So you must have awful fast beta readers.
They get 2 weeks, buddy. 2 weeks to read that damn thing.
So at some point in time, you could have a universe where Kelsey Bandar is the bad guy.
Oh,
and her brother was the sweet and innocent one.
Have you read my manuscript?
No, but if I was smart enough with technology, I would certainly spy on you.
You and the NSA both.
I laughed, you laughed, the toaster laughed.
Exactly so.
All right. So as a longtime listener of the podcast, Chris and I both know a little bit about where the series goes. I know that you wing it with regard to the overall arc. And you said they don't always end up where you thought they would. So where did you originally see the series going?
I don't think that I saw that far in advance, because when I write a book, I'm writing in chunks. I'm writing in the very small scale of what's happening to get the story advanced to a certain point. Series-wide, obviously, their goal for this initial series is to stop the AIs. So that's still way, way off. And I just have to set smaller intermediary goals to write the books.
Did it start with a Terminator? I'm just asking.
Nope, no Terminator.
Dang it. You failed. You had one job, Terry. One job. You could have given us Skynet. You've done it right.
I still might give you Skynet.
If the books sell well enough, right?
So
That's right.
All technology can be purchased.
So, wow. Okay. So you didn't really have an end goal. So you just started writing.
Yeah, I'm all about the characters, their growth, the adventure that they go on, how the story fits into what happens next. It really doesn't matter to me, because I'm having a good time exploring what's going on as the story is happening. It's an adventure. I want them to have an adventure, and then I want them to have another adventure. That's what I'm writing. I don't have to know where it goes.
That would drive me bonkers.
So I'm wondering, do you ever see yourself moving from one series to another, having a previous or what you just wrote influencing another series?
Yeah.
Sure. Is it just the learning process of what you've learned from writing, or do you take a technique or a nice hook that you did in your last one and try to bring it into another series?
No, it's all about the feel good. If I'm writing something or I'm reading something, people say, "Oh, I don't read this here because it's going to influence my writing." I want it to influence my writing. When you get inspired by something, whether it's something you just finished writing or something you've read, take that inspiration and don't put it whole cloth into what you're writing, but be influenced by it, because that type of energy is priceless.
Right. And the more inspired you are, the faster you can write too. Correct?
Yeah. when I wrote a post-apocalyptic novel called Scorched Earth, and I think I wrote that thing in 3 weeks.
Wow.
Because I was just so amped at writing that story that I just could not stop. I had a 12,000 word day writing in that damn book. It was
that one
off the hook.
Was that one you dictated, or was that one you typed?
And I still do dictate. I waffle back and forth between using Dragon and not, but I'm back to using it again.
Okay. So that's one of the things you can do those long, long days is when you have your kids are all grown.
It's true. When you're ancient and as old as Methuselah, you can do that.
So speaking of the Dragon, in case you weren't aware, that's the Nuanced Dragon. It's a dictation software that you can use for lots of things. They have like doctor apps, and although we're not doctors, not even close.
Do you play one on television?
Never. I barely play myself in daily life. So how did you... so you've written obviously by yourself, and what you read and what you've written on your own has influenced obviously your growth. How did working with another more established author when you did the Heart of Vengeance series with Glenn Stewart, how did that change your writing, or did it? Because that was recent.
Writing with him on the Vengeance duology, which is what he calls those 2 books, it was not really something that influenced the way that I'm writing because of what they were. This was basically a novel that he had written when he was in college, that the bones of it were pretty good, that he decided that it just needed to be rewritten to make it better and expanded. So that's what I did. I was already taking what existed and basically rephrasing, rewriting what was there and expanding with scenes to add into the middle of it. These new books, though, that I'm working with him, that's going to be something that I've never done before. That's going to be interesting because we're going to be writing these next 3 books as a team, and we're still not sure exactly how that's going to work.
Mm-hmm. Okay. That'd be interesting because I know, because Amazon's algorithm favors people that are quicker at producing, and there's only so much you can do to speed up things like editing and cover artists. Obviously hearing how other people manage co-writing, which is one of the things they're doing to speed things up, is always fascinating.
Well, what I suspect is going to happen, and I could be proven wrong, is that either I'm going to write the first half of the book or he's going to write the first half of the book, and then the other person will finish it out. And it could be crazier. It could be he'll write one point of view and I'll write the next. I don't see that happening. Maybe not now, but there's all type of potential ways that this could work out. His and mine voice are actually fairly similar in the way that we tell stories. So we're blessed in that, right? Because we could write totally different styles and this would be a nightmare.
Now, does this mean you're going to have to actually outline? Because, if you do the intertwining story arcs with different POVs, I mean, you'd have to know where he's going and vice versa.
He outlines. He's going to be delivering me an outline sometime this month for the first book. We'll go over it. We'll decide what we like, what we don't like. Then when the writing starts, the outline could go out the window. We could veer wildly off of that outline. He's not married to it, neither am I.
Okay.
It's just a guiding principle.
All right. Well, that'll be interesting to hear about once you guys get going on this.
I think you could learn a lot from that. I think we'd like to hear about that on the Dead Robots as well, as to what you learn along the way. But what did you learn, or what experiences have you brought from the Army that have influenced your writing, especially with the battles and the tactics?
Well, I served in the 80s, so I didn't have a whole lot of battles and tactics in there. And
it was a Cold War.
There was the Cold War, but that was about it. We almost went to Grenada, but, well, the damn 82nd. What can I say? They hogged all the glory for themselves. But in any case, what I pulled from the military was more the sense of how it worked, the people, the kind of people that are in the military and their personalities. That's much more valuable to me than the technical knowledge of how step A, 1, 2, B, how these things work in the military. It's all about how things feel, the environment. That's what I want in these stories, the characters and the environment. The specifics, those are less important. But I pulled a lot of it out in how my Marines act. Even though I was never a Marine, I go ahead and I instill some of the things of the personality of the people that I served with in the Army.
Yeah, and I think it works really well.
Wow. Some Marines are going to consider that blasphemous. But so this is a great debate among the writing community and the reading community. So when you write your Space Marines, capital M or lowercase?
Lowercase.
Ooh, do they get hate mail? Do you get hate mail?
I've actually only heard from one person about it, and he's a Marine and he's an author as well, and he fussed at me about it.
I got one comment about, because I used, instead of oorah for the Army or whatever, I think what does the Marines say with the O instead? I used like an archaic form of huzzah, and the critic wrote on the review was like, that is not what Marines say, and I'm thinking, but maybe Space Marines do. So I thought if I changed it up and did something that neither service used, I'd be okay. But no, the Marines weren't having it.
Just imagine the kind of heck that Paul Cooley gets out of his Space Marines.
Ooh, yeah. We'll have to, when we have him back on, we'll have to ask him.
I must be a
about
plebe
that.
because I wasn't offended by anything. I just enjoyed the story.
Yeah, I don't think anyone's really offended. I think mostly people just like to give each other a hard time, and that whole inter-service rivalry, which is something you learn when you serve. I think that it's just good fun. So, one of the
except for the Air Force, we really like sticking it to the Air Force
because they have it so well. I mean, have you eaten in their defects? Good God!
Actually, I did. When I was in the service, we went to Nellis Air Force Base for some joint training. And I got to eat in their cafeteria. I'm like,
when I did some cold weather training, we convinced all the Air Force personnel who were there, and we were out there in our camis, and we were hunting each other in the woods basically. But we convinced them all that anybody who had more than 2 stripes should be saluted. So they were running around saluting everybody until they saluted our sergeant major, who then brought us out into formation and read us the riot act, quit screwing with the zoomies.
So when I was doing my pre-deployment to Iraq the second time, we were doing mobilizing out of Fort Dix Army Base, which is right next to McGuire Air Force Base. I think that's it. And so we used to climb the fence and basically go over the wire to sneak into their DFAC because it was so much better than what the Army had.
Low crawling, trenching.
There were some places along the fence line where you could, if you went under the drainage ditch, as long as it hadn't rained and your uniform didn't get disgusting and the first sergeant found you, because he could tell if you've got the mud on you exactly what you'd done. So I always thought that was fascinating. And if you want, I think this is a good example. If people want to know how military thinks about tactics, go out and go to IKEA and buy one of their things that you've got to put together and see how complicated their directions are and multiply that by a factor of about 10. That's what the military tries to do when they get too convoluted.
Tear the directions in half and only give you half.
and then only give you the Spanish language or whatever foreign language you don't read in that section. Oh, Terry's laughing at us because he probably can read all of that and it makes perfect sense to him. I don't know what you're talking about, guys.
I just pretend that it makes sense. So that's the real trick of being a non-commissioned officer is you look at that, it makes no sense to you, and you say, oh yeah, right. I got that. And then you make it up right on the spot.
E3, and when he doesn't do it right, you yell at him until he figures it out.
Right. And then you say, thank God.
All right. Well, this is the section where I tell you enough about you. The shameless plugging is over. What books are you reading in the genre that you didn't write?
Well, let's see now. I read all kinds of different things. Right now, I'm reading actual lit RPG. I'm listening to the Alter World books by D. Russ. I've actually listened to 6 books already, and I'm at the beginning of book 7. So it's actually more entertaining than I thought it would be. I'm also partway into Artemis, which is by Weir, the guy that did The Martian. Is that Weir? Did I get the name right?
Yeah,
it's the guy that did.
I think so.
It's the guy that did The Martian, and I've also got sitting in my book. I've got The Fold by Peter Klein to listen to. So those are what's on my radar right now.
Yeah, it's surprising how fun that genre is, huh?
Yeah, I didn't expect lit RPG to really capture my attention, and the story as it's being told is fairly simplistic, and the writing style is somewhat simplistic, but it really grabs you. It really does.
So we're actually, because we were curious, we're going to interview a couple authors that write lit RPG. We've got one already, Jason Cordova, scheduled, and then we're interviewing a guy that writes lit RPG from the fantasy side, but we're having him on as sort of a subject matter expert, R-A-M-E-I-J-A. I'm probably butchering any pronunciation. Mija, maybe? But he runs a lit RPG podcast where he talks about it from the fantasy and the sci-fi stories, but he just sort of evaluates them as an Uber fan. So that should be interesting.
Cool.
So... Have you read any of those books, Chris?
Those books. I'm finishing Ready Player One, and then I've read
Awesome.
Control Alt Revolt, which both were very surprisingly good.
Those are on my to be read list.
The movie for Ready Player One is coming out soon, and I just know they are not going to do justice to the book. It's going to be terrible. It may be an awesome movie, but it's the things that they're going to have to cut and leave on the cutting room floor. It's just going to be terrible.
Yeah, but I want to see it anyways because I kind of want to put a face to the characters and see what the stacks look like. Because I imagine in my head, I want to see how they imagined it and how bad and awful and horrible this world is. So I am looking forward to that part.
Okay, I guess I'll have to check those out when I get a sec. I know the Alter World you recommended to me, so I bought book one. I think book one was free at the time, and the audiobook was like $1.99. So I went ahead and figured I'd give it a shot. So we and Chris and I both, because we do some book reviews, so we had heard the Tamer, the series by Michael Scott Earl, was lit RPG and pretty good. So we asked him to be on the show, and the timing isn't going to work probably, but he's like, I don't write a lit RPG. That's not lit RPG. So I think that's one of the fascinating things is what exactly it is. I don't know that anyone agrees on it necessarily. So that whenever there was ambiguity, I thought it was interesting because it lets me do something I like doing, which is research. So I'm like, I'm going to solve this. I will be the guy. So the other thing that we do is that we ask all of the guests that we have, whether they're authors or fans or scientists, is there any scientific breakthrough that you're following, you're excited by at the moment?
At the moment, scientific breakthroughs aren't necessarily something that in and of themselves that really excite me. It's how they're applied. Because I've read things, the thing that in the news that's got me right now is how people have used LiDAR to go ahead and map out the Mayan ruins in Guatemala. And that's applicable because I'm going back to write another book in the same series as Liberty Station. And I did exactly that, went looking for Mayan ruins in Guatemala. They estimate they've figured out now that there's some ridiculous, like 60,000 buildings that they didn't know about, including major ones where they interviewed one of the guys doing this, and he says, years ago, I was standing about 150 feet away from this major building, and I had no idea that it was there.
Wow. I know my uncle's from Guatemala, and he's been bugging me to go when he goes home to visit, to go with him. So I might just have to check it out and make him take me to the ruins then.
They'll never find your body.
Maybe that's why. I have bugged him as a kid.
But things like that, things like stuff from the Large Hadron Collider, just whatever news story, how it impacts what we're doing and what could be a potential story fodder is what I really love.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. What about you, Chris? Anything that's exciting you today in the
story
world
at
of science?
MSN.com. I don't know if you've seen this, but the title is NASA lost contact with the satellite 12 years ago. An amateur just found its signal. I think this is great story fodder.
So, Terry, you worked at NASA 12 years ago, yes?
It's true.
I'm just asking, did you have anything to do with this lost satellite?
Well, see, that's not my department. I actually work for the department that faked the moon landing.
At least you can admit it.
Send your hate mail, too.
You should imagine what kind of reaction you get face to face when you tell people that. They say, "Oh, you worked for NASA. What did you do?" I work for the department that faked the moon landing. I knew it.
So one of the great things about being on the East Coast where I live is because I live in Hampton Roads, Virginia, is that we're not too far from Langley. So when I went to RavenCon, which is in Williamsburg in 2016, one of the guests for the panels was one of the rocket scientists involved in all of the early, including the moon landings. And so I asked him on the panel when they started the conspiracy theories as far as whether we landed or not, like, because I'm curious when that started, this idea that we didn't land there. And he said that literally the day after they landed on the moon, his mother-in-law called him and asked how he faked it. So they didn't even wait for the conspiracy series to start.
How did you do that? Come on, you can tell me.
So that's a good answer. Have you gotten any funny reactions to that one?
Oh yeah, all the time.
That's awesome.
People react bizarrely to that every single time I use it. It's great.
That's probably the best part about working at NASA. You can say that.
I'm gonna start telling people that. Oh yeah. I know a guy who helped fake the landing. Yeah, it wasn't too hard.
There you go. My other favorite saying is that I was living proof that you don't have to be a rocket scientist to work for NASA.
You mean you don't?
That's exactly right. I'm obviously not a rocket scientist.
So this is the section where Chris is supposed to be polite as a co-host and ask me what technology I'm following, instead of making me sound like an air hog and just talking all the time and not letting anyone else speak. But so,
hey, I can see right here on the screen the list of who's been talking where, and you're obviously 2/3 of the conversation.
They did call me Motor Mouth as a kid. I know this shocks you. You're shocked about this, but so the technology advancement that I was following is they've come up with a beam of invisibility. They were sort of inspired by all the cloak of invisibility you see on various sci-fi, so they wanted to see if they can do it. So scientists at the Technical University of Vienna have developed a new strategy to render an object invisible using a beam of invisibility. This is a very, like, if you read the article that we'll link to, it's very complex, and they talk about the algorithms of how you bend light, and it's complex enough that I think it deserves its own segment when we do another tech episode. But it was definitely cool to see, that these cloak ships Predator? Might be real.
This is how you get Predator.
It might be something they could do. I did kind of like Predator.
Even though this guy is a controversial
as long as he's
guy
not
in the realm of physicists, there's a guy named Michio Kaku who wrote a book called Physics of the Impossible that I read years ago.
Yes, I bought
and it's a great book for story ideas because it just goes through the list of technologies that he thinks might happen in the next 50 or 100 years. And it's all ridiculous. Things like an invisibility cloak, totally possible in the world of physics anyway.
So that's actually that's been a running joke with Chris and I, is that we've talked about all of the dream guests we would like to interview. So he wants to talk to R.A. Salvatore because he's been a fan of his works. You should get him on the Dead Robots too, by the way. That'd be an interesting interview. And so for me, I was like, I'd like to maybe get Elon Musk or get I'm gonna butcher his name, but Michio Kaku, I think.
That's the guy I just mentioned.
Yeah, he's the guest I want. So Michio I've actually I've messaged him twice, and so I'm not going to stalk him and send him 100, but I'm just saying I've sent him a request. I've sent him a request to appear on the podcast, and he's probably going to laugh and be like, I don't know who these idiots are. Next.
Of course, he's also sent to Elon Musk at least a couple requests. Wouldn't that be something, though?
So we did a tech episode, and somebody pointed out that I was wrong on something I said when we were talking off the cuff, that the attempts to land to the reusable rocket back on the deck had failed because I'd seen the videos with it falling over, or it wouldn't land precisely. And when you're talking large distances, even a half a degree off starts to matter if it's going to land back where you want it. And apparently the newer landings have been a lot more successful, and so they were pointing that out, that how wrong I was. It was an author, Rick Paltrow, and Nathan Peed, who's one of the patrons for the Dead Robots, who had listened, and they were pointing out how wrong I was. So somebody, I don't remember if it was me or the Ghosts of Christmas Past, I don't know, but when they mentioned that I was wrong on the Sci-Fi Shenanigans Twitter. They said, Elon Musk, do you want to come and correct the record?
There you go.
So I tweeted at him. I don't know if he actually saw it or his, told intern or whatever, but it could happen. So anyway, well, we've hit the hour mark. So Terry, do you want to tell listeners where they can find you? And as always, they'll be in the show notes.
The easiest, if you're looking for my books, you can find me on Amazon. I'm the only Terry Mixon selling science fiction. If you're looking to talk with me or interact with me, Facebook is the place.
All right. So Zuckerberg, you're getting your money's worth with him.
No, I don't know about that.
And Chris, can you tell the listeners where they can find us?
Yes, our website is www.sfshenanigans.com. Our Twitter handle is at SFS, that's Sierra Foxtrot Sierra _show, and our email is podcast@sfshenanigans.com.
Thank you for spending some of your precious time with us. For Chris Winder, I'm J.R. Hanley, and this was the Sci-Fi Shenanigans Podcast. We'll be back next week at the same time, where we'll indulge our love of space and all things that go boom.